So we will walk through the webinar when it starts, and at the end, we'll have an opportunity to answer any questions that you have. So if you have any questions right now, like I see Bobby put a question in the Q&A, or if you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to put them in the Q&A section. And also, please feel free to introduce yourself and where you're from, which part of Africa you're in the chat functionality as well. So the eMQT team, should we make a start or should we give it a few more minutes? Got some attendees in.
I would start, Shalom. I think everyone is being very patient, so I'm sure the others can catch up.
Excellent. Let us make a start then. Again, for those of you who are here, thank you for being so prompt. Thank you for joining us this morning. And we really appreciate you being patient. Hopefully, as we go along, more people will be joining. And also, it is being recorded, so it will be made available to all the people that registered. We also realize that there might be connectivity issues. So I would say good morning or good day, wherever you're joining us from today in Africa. My name is Shalom Lloyd. I am co-founder and chief strategy officer here at eMQT. On behalf of the entire eMQT team, who you can see on the screen today joining this webinar, we've got Dr. Tina Barton, our chief operating officer. We've got Emily Moore, our chief technology officer, and Hannah White, who's made all this happen, a project coordinator. So on behalf of the entire team, welcome to our first Africa is Ready movement webinar. It is Black History Month here in the UK where we're based. So in celebration of Black History Month, today we're inviting you, healthcare professionals in Africa, to join us. So thank you all for carving out the time to attend. I know that everyone is really busy. It has taken our team about 2 years to develop the amazing tools we'll demonstrate for you today. But this webinar came about because we realized that when it comes to Africa, we do have to work together collectively and share like we haven't done before. Yesterday, we hosted a webinar with pharmaceutical professionals. So this is our second webinar. And in that webinar, we were trying to get pharma companies to understand that you as healthcare professionals are ready for clinical trials. So not to waste any more of your precious time, we'll make a start. But before we do that, here's some housekeeping rules. You will be on mute and your camera is off. As I said previously, please feel free to use the chat functionality. The webinar is being recorded and there will be Q&A at the end. So let's get Africa ready. Hopefully you can hear us and see the slides on the screen. And if you can't, please use the chat functionality to let us know if you can't hear or see us or any of the slides. So hopefully you can see the slide. Our mission today, our reason for inviting you today is to talk about our why here at eMQT, to talk about Africa and drug development, the problem, the fact that change is possible. And of course, you can't talk about a problem without a solution. And the solutions we'll be presenting to you today, Atom and Insight. And we'll go through that in a bit more detail. And of course, like I said, we'll have questions and answers at the end. My name is Shalom Lloyd, and I'm co-founder and chief strategy officer at Emerging Markets Quality Trials, eMQT. Although patients of African descent make up 17% of the world's population,
Only 3% of us are involved in clinical trials. Being African, I'm here to change that. And that's my why here at eMQT. Trying to get patients access to amazing medicines and get our healthcare professionals involved in global clinical trials.
My name's Tina Barton and I'm Chief Operating Officer here at eMQT. I've worked in the pharmaceutical industry developing new medicines for almost 40 years now, and it's a real passion of mine. As I've worked through my career looking at places all over the world, I haven't actually worked in Africa. They're not included, and so here at eMQT we want to change that, bringing African patients into the global clinical trial arena.
My name is Emily Moore and I am the Chief Technology Officer at eMQT. Why eMQT? For me it's about diversity and inclusion. It's about changing the narrative about the way Africa is viewed by pharmaceutical companies, and I believe that's a win-win situation. It's all about the data. It's about developing new technology to engage patient centricity. And finally, it's about dedication. At eMQT, we're dedicated to make a difference.
We hope that video was able to articulate and explain our why, certainly from the leadership here at eMQT. We wanted to kick off with a fact. 95% of African cancer patients in Africa are diagnosed way too late for treatment. In this day and age, this should not be happening. There are 8 billion people approximately on our planet, yet less than 3% of us, of Black people, are included in clinical trials. Patients of African descent, less than 3% of us are included in clinical trials. That is just a staggering number. But the fact is that by 2050, our continent, Africa, which is made up of 54 countries, will represent more than a third of the world's population. So this is a continent that the pharmaceutical industry can no longer ignore. And if you think about it, 80% of trials today miss their original recruitment timelines. So again, these are facts that point towards the fact that Africa can no longer be ignored or excluded in global commercial clinical trials. You will see this number again and again and again, and we kind of sing it like a song. The fact that this continent houses a huge population. When you see clinical trials, they're normally tagged as global clinical trials, but they do not reflect the global patient population because they do not consistently represent or include Africa, this continent that is a home to over 1.3 billion people with tremendous potential. All of you as healthcare professionals who have joined this call today, this webinar today, have patients that you see every day, drug-naive patients across multiple therapeutic areas. And as you may well know, there is a focus on communicable diseases. This must change. It doesn't mean that communicable diseases aren't important, but non-communicable diseases are equally as important. There is a problem, however, and we continue to ask ourselves, why isn't Africa routinely included in clinical trials globally? 30% of trial sites either recruit no patients at all or just one patient. Yet this industry keeps going back to the same sites over and over again because there's a fear of committing to Africa. Now, we also have to acknowledge that fear. VUCA is a big one. Africa is volatile, it's uncertain, it's complex, and it's ambiguous. Pharma companies that we meet and talk to all the time are afraid of the fact that they ask us questions like, is the infrastructure there? Do the healthcare professionals have the experience and the right training? Will culture be a hindrance? What about the regulatory terrain? And a big one, really, is the fact that there is this fear of the guinea pig syndrome, not wanting the African healthcare professionals or patients, when they're involved in trials, to feel as if they're being used as guinea pigs. That is the reality. But change is certainly possible. When we look at the journey, clinical trial journey across the globe, the arrival of ICA-GCP years ago and the movement into North America and Western Europe, expansion into Central and Eastern European countries, that was huge. There was also a fear to go into Central Eastern Europe. But the industry expanded their clinical trial drug development footprint into Latin America, India, China, Asia. I told you you'd be seeing this number over and over again. By 2050, our continent will represent a third of the world's population. We have treatment-naive patients. It doesn't mean, and I'm by no means saying that we do not have any clinical trial experience. There is a lot of non-commercial clinical trial experience, investigator-led trials, but we can say categorically that routinely, Africa is not included in global commercial clinical trials. But what we do know is that Africa is a new frontier, and that change is definitely possible. So what is the solution? We can talk about the fears that the pharma industry has. The solution is our collective responsibility. We cannot actually expect somebody else to actually get us ready in Africa or solve the problem. We cannot continue to work in silos. There are so many groups, so many associations trying to do the same thing, all with great intent. But we need to work collectively to build centers of excellence together. And if you allow me, indulge me a little bit, is to ask you to just imagine the collection of healthcare professionals across the African continent, yourselves, a collection of fully trained healthcare professionals to ICA GCP standards on par with their counterparts in the Western world, a collection of centers of excellence. It is not a dream, it is certainly very possible, and we certainly believe that here at eMQT. So now let us talk about the solution. We can talk about the problem all we want, but there has to be a way to solve this. We do know, and hopefully you agree, please feel free to use the chat functionality or the Q&A functionality. We do know that when you have site capabilities, when a site is viewed as capable, and when you have a knowledge, when the site or center is viewed as knowledgeable to industry standard, they can be considered a center of excellence suitable to participate in global clinical trials. So how do we make sure that we have capable sites and we have sites with the right knowledge? This is where we introduce you to the first tool, the assessment tool for overseas markets. The assessment tool for overseas markets is eMQT's tool, which provides an evaluation of site capability and capacity with the main aim of supporting the development of centers of excellence in Africa for engagement in global trials. Think about it, the establishment of such healthcare and medical centers of excellence across Africa is a necessity. The wonderful thing looking at the attendees of this webinar is seeing that you all come from different countries within Africa. And in one tool, we're able to collate all the information that pharmaceutical companies consider relevant and necessary to consider a site suitable and ready for clinical trial when the protocol fits. This makes ATOM a tool that provides reliable, timely, accurate information to gauge the capacity and capability of your center anywhere in sub-Saharan Africa. So the main aim of ATOM is to gather knowledge, specific local requirements, and capabilities to allow your centers to demonstrate your readiness to participate in global commercial trials. In order to give drug development companies, pharma companies, biotech, CROs in startup mode or well-established the confidence that your centers in Africa that are chosen for specific projects or trials not only have the required capacity and capability, but that you also have the infrastructure, the knowledge to meet the global requirements. What ATOM does is collect up to 400 data points for your site. Now let's show you ATOM. Hopefully you can see this screen. If you can't, please let us know in the chat functionality. Welcome to ATOM. This is the dashboard, and from here you can see that it reports the site and the countries already involved. It also has an interactive map. For those of you, if you're anything like me who are lacking in geography sometimes, it tells you the status of those sites in ATOM, and there's an audit trail on the right-hand panel, as you can see here, listing all the changes, where they were, when they were made, and by whom they were made. You can also see on this screen, there is the opportunity to add a new site. So if you want your site added into ATOM, this is certainly possible. And there's also an administrator functionality on the right side as well. Now we're going to walk you through the level of information that is collected within ATOM and how this is used to assess your site's readiness for clinical trials and how it also identifies any gaps your center might have. Today, though, I would like to actually thank one of our principal investigators from a site that we have proudly worked with, who is now listed within the ATOM tool, Dr. Francine Ntumi, Director General at FCRM in Congo. We really thank Dr. Francine for granting us permission to use her site for the purposes of this demonstration. We're actually demonstrating in our live ATOM portal. We actually considered recording this and playing it during this webinar, but we wanted to really show you a live site. So we will now take a look at how ATOM has captured and recorded all the relevant information that has been collected for Dr. Francine's site. This site list shows a snapshot of some of the sites we've included, and it's worth noting that there is a reporting functionality from which a full report on the site can be generated, allowing us to provide you with specific analysis for your specific site and looking at the readiness for commercial trials and also identifying any gaps and ideas for resolution. Hopefully you can still see the screen. If you can't, please let us know. But on this view, the home page for the site is clearly identified at the top with the primary contact details listed. And on the right side, a box which tells you the status of this site. You can see that this one, Dr. Francine's site, is in archive mode because we have majority of the information recorded, meaning that it is not on the active or review stage, and as it has been finalized and archived. However, please note that there is a full audit trail of all the information that is entered into ATOM, allowing us to go back to this particular site to update and add new information that comes into light without losing any of the historic information that we had earlier. Across the top, there are 9 tabs which identify the different categories that we have assessed when compiling information into ATOM. On this homepage, you can see here, it provides the primary contact details for the lead investigator at the site. It is also worth noting at this point that of course you may have more than one investigator at a particular site or hospitals from different specialities. So the hospital may be listed more than once, but each investigator only once, because this might be therapeutic area specific. Now let us look at the other 8 tabs. Next, we have the team tab. This first one is the team at your site, and meaning those relevant for running a clinical trial and doesn't include all the doctors, nurses, and other staff in the hospital, but purely those that the lead investigators feels would be involved in the delivery of a clinical trial and the roles that those individuals would take for the trial. The next tab looks at experience. What sort of clinical trial experience you may have been involved in previously? Who sponsored them? For a pharma company, academic groups perhaps, and also experience of trials across the different phases. As well as trial experience, we look at training for clinical trials, particularly GCP training and data reporting experience using EDC systems. We collect information about your auditing experience and in the way in which you would contract with external companies to run a trial at your site. The next tab, or the next 2 tabs, I should say, are infrastructure and facilities. Let's look at infrastructure. In today's digital world, it is important to understand the ease of access to the internet and whether you have dedicated equipment available for clinical trial work, and particularly important, the backup, data storage, and data security your facility has in place. The Facilities tab looks at the internal resources at your site. How many patient beds do you have available for clinical trial subjects? And all other needs that must be in place. For example, ECGs, fridges and freezers, particularly as low as minus 80 degrees, that may be required for storage of clinical trial materials. Long-term archiving is a key requirement of GCP, so it's important to understand from your site the process that is used, whether electronic or paper, and how you would accommodate the monitor when they come to review the source documents. All this information is captured within Atom. Let's talk about sampling. This is about all the potential biological samples that may be required across any trial. This includes routine blood samples and how these can be taken, analyzed at a local lab or in your hospital and reported. This tab also collects what the specialist assessments the local lab is able to do, such as genetic testing or specific viral agents, such as COVID antibodies, something we did quite a lot of over the last few years. This tab also records histology, expertise and experience, and the ability to provide frozen sections. The logistics of collecting, storing, and shipping samples are also covered in this particular area within Atom. Pharmacy and safety. This tab is all about pharmacy and safety requirements, focusing on clinical trial medications and safety reporting for patients on trials. Information is collected about the pharmacy at your site, storage and dispensing, including formulation preparation of any IMP, as well as returns and destruction policies that you may have in place at your site. Safety is paramount in all that we do. So Atom records what emergency procedures are in place at your site that may be required during a trial. Ethics and regs. This is about ethics and regulatory process necessary at any particular investigator site, in this case, Dr. Francine's site. It captures all you would expect that we need to know about around meeting schedules, required submission documents, review timelines, and what else might be required to achieve that final first site approval that we so desperately want. The most common additional approval is the MTA, the Material Transfer Agreement, as we all know. This section also includes some specific questions around informed consent, especially relating to what your local ethics expect to see, and if there's a standard template in place that has to be utilized or adapted for a particular trial. The last tab here is files. And this tab, we have it in place because we can attach your CVs and your team members' CVs. We're also able to attach videos here. This is all housed in this section in Atom. Remember, during the presentation, I talked about giving the pharmaceutical companies confidence that we have the infrastructure, the facilities to run trials. This is where we're able to provide them with your CVs, talk about your experience, and files and videos of your hospital, which can show them the facilities live on camera. Videos of the site facilitate a very excellent way of understanding what is available at the site that we want to be working with. Remember, I talked about 400 data points being collected in Atom, so it's very, very comprehensive. And once all the questions in Atom have been answered about a particular site or your center, we're then able to uncover what gaps that may be in place and areas that require further improvement or investigation. And I hope it's no surprise to you that to date, the majority of the gaps that we've identified are knowledge gaps. These gaps are then bridged using eMQT's knowledge management platform, Insight. So Atom that we just shows you complements Insight, our knowledge management system. So we'll walk you through Insight and demonstrate to you what Insight entails, what it looks like, what it means for you. So we've entered all your information into Atom, and we've identified some knowledge gaps within your site, either for yourself as healthcare professionals or your site staff. Now let us show you how we'll plug those knowledge gaps. Welcome to Insight. This is the next step of the solution to enable you as healthcare professionals across the African continent to become fully trained in the standards required for clinical trials run according to ICH GCP and global requirements, and continue on your journey towards building centers of excellence. Insight is an innovative platform that provides targeted knowledge and learning plans to ensure that all involved in clinical trials are able to understand and execute their roles to ultimately bring added value to our patients and ensure the necessary level of understanding and focus to meet global requirements. As you can see here, Insight has been designed for multiple stakeholders, including yourselves. You can see here that we also have a section in Insight that actually provides training for pharmaceutical professionals, giving them some knowledge about how to work in Africa, the do's and don'ts, and what to expect in Africa. So here, we're going to focus on you as healthcare professionals based in Africa. And as healthcare professionals, you are the bridge between the patients and the pharmaceutical industry. Through this Insight platform, you'll be able to obtain targeted knowledge and become armed with the tools to help ensure that you're able to execute your role in the clinical trial process to meet global regulatory requirements. This will allow increased value to be provided to your patients in trials at the same level as your global counterparts. From introduction to clinical trials, to your role within the trial, to the protocol, the patient, collecting data, regulatory standards, and so much more.
Welcome to the Emerging Markets Quality Trials Knowledge Management System and the Healthcare Professionals section. Here in this section, we aim to enable you to learn more about global clinical trials and how to run those to ICH GCP standards. There will be a general introduction to clinical trials. There will be, most importantly, aspects of patient safety and drug management, looking at what you need to do, your role, your responsibilities to enable successful completion of global clinical trials to the standards required today. Our aim here at eMQT is to support you in your learning and your opportunity to get involved in global clinical trials and to enhance and target your knowledge and understanding of what's required these days. In this way, you will bring value to yourself, to your institution, and most importantly, to the patients that you serve.
Insight has been designed with ease of mind, making it suitable for everyone involved. And you will have access to a variety of chapters and modules tailored to meet your needs and the budget at your site. Insight takes you on a journey through the clinical trials pathway, taking cultural differences into account whilst encouraging an inclusive behavior. At the end of each module, each learner will have acquired more knowledge, key learnings, and important information to enable greater understanding and input into their own role in research and potential advancement in your chosen area. There are currently 11 chapters available to you as African healthcare professionals. Drug development overview, regulations for medicinal products, ethical issues, drug safety, clinical development, clinical trial key documents, clinical trial process, investigational drug management, data management, analysis and reporting, and of course, quality in clinical trials. These chapters can either be delivered as a face-to-face training, virtually through a training session, or managed individually online. Each chapter can contain from 1 up to 5 modules. And once you as a healthcare professional set up your account, you'll be able to access your dashboard. And whichever courses you have enrolled will then appear on your dashboard, as you can see here. For the purpose of this demonstration, we have selected a couple of chapters just to give you a little bit of a flavor of what they contain and how easily you can navigate this Insight platform. Now, let's go into the chapter on regulations for medicinal products. You can see here really quickly the knowledge checkpoints that will test your knowledge as you go through the learning. Here you can see the percentage of your completion percent. Sorry about that. Here you can see the percentage completion on the left-hand side, and you can see that this particular chapter contains about 4 modules. And like I mentioned, we're going to go and look at the module ICH GCP Investigator Responsibilities and just play you a couple so you can get the feel of what it is like.
Welcome to this training session, which will describe to you the responsibilities of an investigator according to ICH Good Clinical Practice, otherwise known as ICH GCP regulations. Transforming Healthcare Research in Africa. eMQT are focused on sub-Saharan Africa and helping to bridge the gap between the pharmaceutical companies and the centers of excellence in Africa, as eMQT believe it is important that clinical trials reflect the true global nature of the world's population. Today, the focus of this presentation is on ICA-GCP and what the requirements are for investigator sites such as yours. It really focuses on the investigator responsibilities at the site, and this presentation not only give you an overview, but really talk about the responsibilities under ICH that you will all have as a site when conducting a global clinical trial.
Now, hopefully that has given you a little flavor for that section. There are some questions that have come in that actually speak to the need for training like this. We're going to look at another chapter on clinical trial key documents with a little bit of a focus on the protocol. Again, this is just giving you a snippet about what Insight looks like. And as you can see here, again, there are knowledge checkpoints as you go through the modules and chapters. For some of you who have just joined, each chapter can contain anything from one module up to 5 modules. Now we're going to actually demonstrate a few more slides for you in this particular area with a focus on the protocol.
So what is the purpose of the protocol? The protocol has a very clear purpose. It describes the why, the what, and the how to try to answer a specific research question. It has to have clear and concise objectives, and it has to document the expectations for success or failure, both clinically and statistically. The contents of the protocol. GCP is very clear about what the protocol should contain. Contents are clearly listed in its requirements, and it has to describe the background and methodology to the research questions that you're trying to answer. It has to talk about the objectives, the design, the methodology that you're using, and the statistical considerations that have been thought about in putting the protocol together. Last but not least, it talks about the need to explain the organization of the trial. And as you can see, this document has to really cover a huge amount of information. It is critical to ensure that you can run your trial consistently and in the same way at every single site. It's clearly a control document for any trial, and therefore it has to be version controlled. Additionally, any changes or updates that are required are also controlled. And I'm going to talk about control documents, version control, and also changes and updates later in this module.
We hope that has given you a little bit of a flavor of the Insight module, the Insight platform. This brings us to the end of our live demonstration, and we really thank you for listening, and we hope that we really gave you a flavor. These tools have taken us, like I said previously, a couple of years to develop. The eMQT team have always seen the potential in Africa, and we've been knocking on doors for pharma to say, Africa can run your trials, give us the trials, until we realize, as I mentioned before, the fears that they have. That's when we knew that we had to address these fears. And a good way of addressing them is using our assessment tool for overseas markets, Atom, to capture all the information about your site. So I'm hoping that everyone on this call would like to be atomized, have your centers within Atom, and this will help identify gaps. And the knowledge gaps identified can then be actually plugged with the modules with Insight so that we have the site capability and capacity and the knowledge. And that's how we're on our way to build centers of excellence within Africa. And to be honest, we're hoping that as we work through different countries, we'll be able to develop centers of excellence as we go along. It is important to also note here that eMQT has been listed as a continuing professional development CPD provider. Hence, these courses that you've seen within Insight have all been CPD accredited. Now, the action we're asking you to actually take today is let's get you registered and help you become a center of excellence. We have to work together. We cannot work in silos. We have to come together as a continent across the 54 countries, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, to attract pharma companies and show the pharma companies that we do have the capability, we do have the knowledge, and we do have the centers of excellence. So let's register you into Atom today. Now I'll ask my colleagues to unmute themselves and come off camera because now we're able to address any questions that you may have. Dr. Barton, you're still on, your camera is still off. Do you want to come
Yeah,
off?
sorry, just correcting that.
Yes, just off the bat, somebody's asking if there is a possibility of sending this presentation. Yes, if you're registered, you will be able to send it through automatically, but we'll also have a link that will publish that can be shared because we realize that hopefully some of you are not watching this alone individually, you're watching this with other people as well. Before we go into the key questions that are in the portal, we have a couple of raised hands. I don't know if we're going to be able to allow them to talk. Is that okay? I'm just asking the eMQT team. We can bring some people online. There's, I think it's Professor Adelowo. I can.
Shalom, let me just address the questions in the Q&A first, if that's okay. And
Okay.
then while then you can work out who you need to bring in to ask the other questions. Is that all right?
That's fine.
Okay, so just in no particular order, I think apologies for the use of abbreviations that you're not familiar with. Having worked in this industry for so long, we kind of forget that not everyone is familiar with them. But hopefully from the opportunity to see Insight there, you now know that GCP stands for Good Clinical Practice, and that is the overarching requirement of running commercial clinical trials around the globe. So it's really important we all understand that. Professor Tagbo, you asked about vaccine trials, and yes, we are committed to supporting any type of trials, any type of drug development investigations, whether it's vaccines, devices, actual chemical drugs, and even doing diagnostic assessments and diagnostic tool support as well. So yes, anything that is required by the pharmaceutical industry to bring new medicines and or devices to the market is something that we're happy to get engaged in. And Bobby, you asked a question quite early on this morning, so sorry for the wait. We work collaboratively with other folks in Africa as and when our sponsors require us to have people on the ground. So we don't have our own office, as it were, but we use contractors and freelancers and partner with other groups to make sure we're able to meet the needs of our sponsors and the companies that we work with as we develop new medicines or do other trials for them. I hope that answers your question.
Just to add to Bobby's question, that we talked about that we can't do this in silos. We have to do this collaboratively. So we're able to work with. We have freelance CRAs. We work with project managers on ground. So we're able to collaborate and work with different partnerships. We do have Dr. I think it's Professor Adelowol. Apologies. You have your hand raised. You can ask your question live. You can unmute yourself and ask your question if you wish.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
My name is Adelowo, and I'm from Nigeria. I'm a consultant rheumatologist. And first of all, I must thank you immensely for promoting this discussion. Without overflogging the background, Africa has been, at least south of the Sahara, except maybe South Africa, has been overlooked in most drug trials. But the point is that sometimes the findings in the Western world or the experience may be different from that of the sub-Sahara African. And sometimes our experience may actually be more, maybe educative even to the findings that you have there. So this is a very good intervention. I must thank your organization for arranging this. And we've had discussions on this before. Now, my questions are this. Do you work with specific pharma companies, or you work with just virtually, I mean, all pharma companies involved in innovative research? That's my number one question. Number two, realizing that most African countries may not be able to afford the costs of some of these courses, are there anything you're doing, to ease our participation in such courses? And then thirdly, many countries in Africa are vast, and it may be quite expensive and impossible to have physical meetings. Are you considering virtual meeting in such countries as deemed possible? Once again, thank you so much for your presentation.
Oh, Prof, your comments are music to my ears. Thank you so much for attending. We really appreciate your time. Your comments are very, very valid, and your questions are very valid. Tina, do you want me to take the first one, for example?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. So, yes, if I can remember what the first one was specifically.
The first one was of working across therapeutic, different
Yeah.
pharmaceutical companies across.
Yeah, we basically work with whoever we can encourage to come to Africa. We're trying really hard, as you heard, to engage with pharma companies around the world, and we don't discriminate. We don't mind whether it's one of the big global names that we all know so well, or whether it's a small startup biotech that's only got one molecule. We want to get them into Africa, and if we can encourage them to do that and to look at sites in Africa, then we work with whoever we think is going to enable us to do that. So we're not therapeutically specific, we're not company specific, we're all about trying to get as much work into Africa as possible to get the African population represented appropriately in our global trials.
And if I can just add to that, one of the joys of having a site established within Atom is that from Atom, we're able to know when we're approached by a pharmaceutical company, if your site is listed in Atom, for example, if they approach us to say they want to do a particular trial in rheumatoid arthritis, then we're able to go into Atom to figure out which of our sites are in Atom that have that experience in that particular therapeutic area. That's also why we've developed that tool. So we're able to figure out which of our contacts or centers of excellence are specializing in a particular therapeutic area. Your second question was about, I think it was affordability of this training. And Tina, I can start by saying, I mentioned yesterday, we also ran a webinar, a similar webinar about Africa for pharmaceutical professionals. And we had over 60 at one point, pharmaceutical industry professionals attend. And one of the things that we put to them was actually getting their support, but also train certain centers. Obviously, we cannot offer training for free, but we also understand the issues in terms of affordability and are looking for ways to also get support and funding from pharma to help. I hope that answers the question. I don't know if any of my colleagues have anything else to add to that.
Now, I would just add that we look at all sorts of opportunities. There are grant applications that we can apply for, both here in the UK and in your local country, to support training of experts. That we also work very closely with individual sites, which we've done in the past, and said, well, okay, what budget do you have? And we'll tell you what we can achieve with that budget that's most cost effective for you. So we really are trying to find that win-win situation.
Yes.
And, whether you do a big group face-to-face or it's done individually online using the system, we try and make it as palatable as possible in terms of the cost, and certainly very much value for money. If you look at other courses that are run, then I think we're pretty well placed within those.
I can't remember the third question now.
No, what was the third question, Prof?
All right, can I go ahead? The third question is, that you had made a mention that such courses could be physical, and I'm saying that many African countries are vast, and the cost of bringing people together may be quite prohibitive. So, would you consider that for most of the African countries, it might going to, or it's likely to be a virtual meeting rather than
absolutely? And that's the main reason, Prof, that we developed Insight as an online tool. So basically, what you can do if you don't have the opportunity to bring a group together, either physically in one place or even like we are now on a webinar or a Zoom call, then there is the possibility to go into the system at your own leisure and go through the courses independently on your own, in your own time. And we've certainly done that with a couple of sites already, and they found it, very easy to use and very successful way of learning.
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, the world we live in right now is quite virtual. And, we also are out there saying to pharmaceutical companies that, technology in Africa is also advancing. So if we can't run our course online and adapt it to the situation, then we're not practicing what we're preaching. So we're certainly able to offer hybrid solutions. Does that answer all your questions, Professor Delowo?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Shalom. Thank you very much, Tina, for your response.
A pleasure. Thank you for attending. We really, really appreciate you being here. We really appreciate everyone being here. Any other questions? Please feel free to ask any questions that you have. As we mentioned, this will be made available after the webinar. And after the webinar, you will probably receive a very short survey to let us know how you felt about the webinar, anything that you'd like to hear next time, and your general feedback. I'm going to hold on for a couple of minutes to see if any more question will come in. No question too little or too much. Please feel free to ask. There's a comment here from Frank that says, I think it is a hard time to have a database for all clinical trial sites in Africa and the area of interest. Very good comment, Frank. I don't think we're going gung-ho and trying to include every single site in Africa. That's not the intention at all. we actually want to be able to, as we're going to different countries and working in different countries, we're including them into ATOM. And part of having this webinar is also to generate interest from your side to say, is it something that's of interest to you? Today, when we receive requests from pharmaceutical companies, it is through our network of healthcare professionals who refer us to other healthcare professionals for a particular trial or for inquiry about a trial. So we're not looking to include all African sites. Absolutely not. It's baby steps. But in the end, we're hoping to have a robust tool that will actually house amazing centers of excellence. And don't forget what we said at the presentation. It might be a particular hospital that we're working with. It has different departments. So that one center will house different therapeutic areas, and that could be a center for different trials with different pharma companies. I hope that answers your question, Frank, or at least addresses your comment.
And maybe I could add something, Shalom, because Frank, I think Shalom made it clear we're not trying to get all sites. But the other thing that we have found is when we've been talking with some of the doctors in some sites in Africa, when we tell them what's involved and what needs to be done and learnt about regarding good clinical practice and how the drug's managed and all the other regulatory and ethical requirements, they've actually come back to us and said, we're not ready for this yet. We don't think we can take that on right now. Can you come back to us in a couple of years? Because we're still very early in our sort of life cycle of learning about clinical trials and what needs to happen. So I think there is, as Shalom said, the great need to do this in a small and stepwise fashion, which is why we're hosting this webinar, because those of you that are particularly interested in moving into this area are the people that we want to work with first.
Exactly.
And that's a great place to start because you've already got the energy and the enthusiasm to get involved.
A bit like Bobby, I can see Bobby saying he's fired up. So are we, Bobby. We're fired up. The reason why we're doing this is really because of the passion that we have for Africa. There's no reason why Africa should not be routinely included. So we have that passion, we have that drive, and we've invested a lot of time and effort in building these tools to actually give you guys confidence and also give the pharmaceutical industry confidence that Africa is ready. If there are no other questions, I think this probably brings us to the end of our webinar. We did set a longer time for this, but we thought actually with the demonstrations, you never know what technology would do, but we're happy it went seamless today. As you can see on the screen, any questions, any feedback, if you're looking to sign up to ATOM, or any inquiries about Insight, please contact us. The contact is on the page now. And as I said, you'll have this recording available to share with peers, with colleagues. WhatsApp is our best friend in Africa, so I would encourage you to please share far and wide so that we can encourage more healthcare professionals to join the movement. We thank you for listening, and we hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Michael, thank you for your comment. And absolutely, I think it's really important that we do look to provide opportunities for all sorts of people that want to get involved in clinical trials. It's not just about the practicing physicians, certainly. It's about the people that support it in terms of managing the data and managing the flow of patients and the flow of documents through the clinical trial. So absolutely, they're at the forefront of our mind as well.
Oh, I like that. There's a thank you to Hannah. Yes, well deserved. Right, I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar now.
Thank you, Shalom, and thank you to everyone who joined us today.